This is Radical Love Live, an ongoing series of podcasts and special events where we explore faith outside the boxes. Hosted by Mark Dilcom and Kelly Wilson.
Hey, Mark.
Hey, Kelly.
How are you?
I am freaking awesome as always.
I love to hear that.
Thank you.
I want to get that printed on a t-shirt.
I'm freaking awesome.
Maybe that'll be our first merch.
Oh, this should be ours first. I'm freaking awesome.
Yeah, I'm freaking awesome.
Yeah.
Well, that's good to hear.
Yeah. How are you?
I am good. I'm very good.
You're good. You're good. You're very good.
Yeah. I mean, it's Friday. I'm a little tired. I'm, ready to go home and take it easy after this.
No way. Yes, after this, we've got an exciting episode coming up though that we got an awesome guest.
We do. We do.
Yeah. So you can kick back after we're done with having our conversation with an awesome guest. How about that?
Yes. Actually, I think I have a Zoom meeting or something with a client after this, but later. Anyway, today we have Josh Patterson with us.
We do.
Back with us. He's the host of the Rethinking Faith podcast.
Yes.
And you're going to be at Theology Beer Camp, right?
Oh, of course.
Yes.
You are.
I will be there.
In October. Yes. In addition to his podcasting and ministry, Josh is also a beer aficionado. We'll all be at Theology Beer Camp, which is hosted by Tripp Fuller and Homebrew Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
Will be some of the podcast guests there, and there will be other speakers, and there will be lots of different craft beers, even some non-alcoholic options. There'll be
for
snacks,
people like me. Yep.
And Eventbrite is where you get the tickets for that. And I know we're probably competing with you, but we have a discount code for people who want to.
Are we competing with Josh though in Rethinking?
Well, I think he's got his own discount code.
Oh well, okay.
I did, but it's your show. Drop your code.
Our code, the secret code on Eventbrite to get $25 discount on the tickets is Radical Hobbit.
Ooh, that's a good one.
I know. Isn't that awesome?
That's right. Can you just picture him? You know what that Hobbit looks like?
Yeah. And especially when you think about Tripp. If you don't know what Tripp looks like, just go to his website, Tripp Fuller. It's TRIPPFULLER. You'll go, oh my God, he does like a hobbit.
I was going to say, is the implication here that Tripp Fuller is a radical hobbit?
Well, if you look
I think that's going to be his favorite compliment he's ever received in his life.
Yeah. The poster for this year's, Theology Beer Camp, there's like a Lord of the Rings theme, or like a Return. I think it's Return of the King. I keep saying it's Lord of the Rings, but a real Lord of the Rings fan would tell me no, it's actually Return of the.
Oh, for us people like me at that level, we don't know the difference. So,
right.
But welcome, Josh. It's good to have you on, man.
Yeah, it's good to see you both again. It's been. When did we hang out?
February.
Geez.
Yeah, in a couple of months.
Yeah, a couple of months.
It has been. It's crazy.
So we met Josh on a panel that we did where it was hosted by Tripp. He was the facilitator, I think is a better word for it. That was asking podcasters. So you were on there along with Tim Whitaker and Kelly and I, and the question was basically about our podcast, spiritual communities, and that was the basis of that. And this was at an event about God after deconstruction. So give full context to how we met you and why we were there and everything else. It was definitely exploring faith outside of the boxes and God after deconstruction. So, yes.
Right, and then God after deconstruction has now yielded a book.
Yes, they have.
That conference was, it was Tripp Fuller, it was Thomas Ord,
yes,
and Jonathan Tabanel spoke. Catherine Keller was there,
yes,
and some other folks. But it's now yielded a book that is out on Amazon and other places that you buy books.
Yeah, wherever you buy your favorite
God
book.
After Deconstruction.
Yeah,
it goes down the list of all these top reasons why people are leaving churches, leaving religion altogether, and takes on these tough questions. So it's really, it's a very good starting place for people who are kind of religion curious or like, maybe I'll make my way back.
Yeah. Well, and that's what you're doing, Josh, with your podcast. So how long have you been doing Rethinking Faith?
Oh, geez. Rethinking Faith turned 5 in October. However, I don't remember how many months ago was October, but however, however many months ago that.
7 months. We'll go with that. That sounds good.
Yeah. So like, I guess about 5.5 years.
Wow.
Well,
Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you. It used to be called Theology Doesn't Suck, and then it got got rebranded to become Rethinking Faith. But yeah, it's been fun.
Yeah. So tell us why you started it.
Okay. So why I started it with a buddy of mine named well, I don't know if they want to be named anymore. I started with a buddy of mine. You can find out who that is if you go listen to the first episode.
Okay.
But what we were trying to help facilitate is that you could have theological conversations across the aisle, so to speak. So my friend was still is a very conservative, like Westminster Confession, regulative principles of worship type Presbyterian.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
I am not that.
Right.
I wasn't quite into like process and open and relational thinking, like I was like I am now then, but I definitely was a different flavor of Christian than him. And so we wanted to have meaningful conversations about different theological topics. And it worked for a bit until it didn't. He ended up stepping away from the podcast because he didn't think it was a good look for him.
For him. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so
the neighbors would think.
yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
That's where we started. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh. And then from that point forward, I think you did mention when we were together at God After Deconstruction, you've had a couple of co-hosts before, but it just seems like the show is just naturally you, right? Josh doing the Rethinking Faith. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I had two, other really great co-hosts. My buddy Marty, who I met working in a church together. He was the worship pastor. Him and I did like 100 some episodes together.
Oh, holy smokes! Okay, that's some
then-
serious. All right.
Yeah, and he ultimately ended up getting a job in a church that did not look favorably upon the podcast, and so they're like, "Well, you can do the podcast or you can work here." And so it's like,
Oh,
"Well,
wow.
you should probably help provide for your family." So
Yeah.
that's why Marty stepped away, and then I brought on a buddy named Greg, who was an Episcopal priest and kind of like spiritual director type person. And we had some fun together, but ultimately Greg made some pretty big life changes, even like including vocational changes, and just decided it was best to kind of step away. And so I've just been rocking solo ever since. Yeah, but seems to still work out. People still listen, so I guess that's good.
Yeah, it looks like you broadcast a lot. I've been following your podcast, and I see new episodes come up pretty frequently. So,
yeah, you have a regular cadence, yeah?
Yeah, I try to put out an episode once a week on Wednesdays.
Yep.
And sometimes, I'll do more than one episode a week if I have something extra that I want to get out. But yeah, typically about once a week. So, and I have a lot of episodes backlogged right now. So I have probably 6 or 7 episodes in the gun ready to go,
Good for you.
yeah.
Good for you. Well, that's what I love about you, dude. Seriously, you, just in that, spending that time we did at the event itself, like well, okay, maybe you should give our listeners a little bit of background and context of, your story and why you are doing what you're doing. So how about we start there, actually?
Yeah, sure. So when I started podcasting, I was a pastor. I was working in vocational ministry. And I don't do that anymore. So there's a story there. The first church I ever worked at, I experienced the quick of it is I experienced, and I don't use these terms lightly, but spiritual, emotional, verbal, and borderline physical abuse at the hands of the head pastor, my boss, and also the founding pastor, the boss of my boss. And that led me to leave that church. I was there for only 8 months, and it was 8 months too long.
Yeah.
Um, so I left and took a job at a Methodist church. And I started podcasting at the Methodist church. So that bad experience didn't turn me off from the church per se. It just kind of made me think like, oh, well, maybe just like that church sucks, but this next one will be fine. And for the most part it was, but it also had some pretty significant issues. Um, and ultimately I ended up leaving that church after about a year and a half. Um, and to move back to Maryland, which is where I live now. These churches were both in Florida. Um,
Mhm.
so we were away from friends and family, which was, added kind of to it. A lot of positive things happened there, but also, like I said, a lot of negative things. One of the most positive things that happened when I was there, where it was the first church that I worked in that was open and affirming. And the worship pastor at the time, my buddy Chad, was an openly gay man. And so that was the first first church I worked in where that was a thing. So that was really cool.
Mhm.
Um, and then I went to my next church back here in Maryland, and I was there for I think almost 2 years, and ended up, you know, essentially going through the process of deconstruction. It started when I was at the Methodist church, kind of kicked off by some of the church hurt stuff, but then also some questions I was asking. And really, I was going through that process while I was on staff as a pastor, which had its own, difficulties. And I ultimately, with the help of a spiritual director, uh, discerned that I should leave vocational ministry. And I became a bartender after that.
Wow,
So
it's a ministry of its
Indeed
in a
it
way.
is, absolutely.
yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
And so all that to say that's kind of my background in there. And so rethinking faith has been with me along the way.
Yeah.
Um, so in a way, like you could, um, you know, with the risk of sounding like self-aggrandizing or something, but you could go back and trace the journey of Josh Patterson, uh,
Mhm.
just by listening to the episodes, because really the show has just been that. I'm
Uh-huh.
talking with the people I wanted to talk to, asking the questions I wanted to ask, and it's just been this 5.5 year journey that's continues today.
Wow. That is, that's that's brilliant actually, because that's not self-aggrandizing at all. You simply just captured, the questions that you wanted, to seek, out and recorded it. And so, the world out and is, it's out there for the world to listen,
Mhm.
Mm,
your experience, because, especially you bring the, deconstruction. Oh my God, that word, it's so used now.
mhm,
And when I started mine, I guess about 11 and a half years ago, I'm sure that it was in the vocabulary somewhere. I didn't know. I just knew that I had to deal with the bullshit that I had picked up much younger in my life and had messed me up for so many years and caused the issues that it did. And then I was in sobriety and I had to, figure out what I was going to do with it. So call it what it is. But I am grateful for whatever word works. I think
mhm,
everybody should have, be careful how I say this. There is value of doing this because ultimately has deepened my faith.
mhm.
Can you say that for yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. I would think so. I too can be weary around using the word deconstruction, just because it's become almost like a pop kind of word, and which is fine. I don't want to take that away from anybody, but at the same time it can mean something different. So yeah, uh I don't know. It's just for me, I just look at it as like spiritual growth, or
Right. Right. Yeah.
hopefully maturity. I don't know. You can ask my wife if she thinks I'm mature, but it's something like that, I don't
Only
know.
looking here to talk to you.
Yeah, call her up. She'll say, "Hell no."
He's still a kid. He's a man
Yeah.
child.
Basically.
Well, and it's I mean, it's there is a biblical basis for the idea that the faith that you have as a child or as a young person is not going to be the same. And when you get older,
right.
you think about, Paul or somebody writing as Paul said, when I was a child, I thought like a child. Now that I'm a man, I think like a man.
Yeah.
And I still only see things as though they're through like a dirty mirror.
Yeah.
So, there is going to be that process.
Mm, mm. That's very true. So I'm going to ask you a completely off the wall question. Do you in your faith, do you see yourself as a mystic at all? And do you enjoy the mystery, or where do you find your faith? Is it something that's more finite and more clear to you?
Yeah, I absolutely love the mystics. My introduction to the mystics came through some of, the more popular Christian mystics, like Saint John of the Cross and Saint Teresa of
Mhm,
Avila.
mhm.
Um, people like that, Martin Laird, Thomas Merton, Richard Rohr, Cynthia Bourgeois. Um, and so that really helped me, kind of mysticism, the experiential aspects of
Yeah.
faith, um, the more, like, I guess you could call it negative theology at times when it's, we can't really say anything positive about the divine.
Yeah.
Those things are very, very helpful. And I still, love the mystics, and it plays a big part in my faith.
Mm,
Yeah, and I mean, I think it lets me hold uncertainty a little bit better. Because for me, I'm a very like head focused person.
yep.
Um, when Greg was on the podcast, we used to talk about the three centers of knowing a lot: head, heart, and body.
Yep.
And what the mystics have helped me do is move out of my head and into my body, if that makes sense,
Mm.
and into my heart
Absolutely.
space.
Absolutely.
And so it's a different for me, it's a different aspect of my faith, a different way of holding it. Because I still love the head stuff. Like, I just
Mm.
recorded a interview this morning about trying to harmonize the work of Alfred North Whitehead and Rene Girard. So process philosophy and mimetic theory, nerd stuff.
That's
Um,
nerd stuff. Good for you, though.
but yeah, but at the same time, the mystics is often where I return. Um, yeah, so I don't
So
know.
I am so glad I asked you that. Because I am I'm a self-proclaimed mystic, and I don't want to put hubris to it, but it's like I'm not scared of using that word, and
Mhm.
because I feel like if more of us would come out of the closet as mystics, we would show what happens in our own faith. We demonstrate it, right? Because you just said it, that to get out of the head. I'm like you. I'm very much in my head, but my faith lives in my heart. It lives in my body, and I need the mystery to, and the meditation and the process of getting it to drop down into me, because otherwise I'll keep it up in the headspace, and that's not where it really belongs. Because after all, God is love, or the divine, whatever you call it, and it's really hard to love from your brain. You got to love from your heart space. It's as really kind of simple as that, and that's the beauty of mysticism, and the mystery of it. And but then also, for us mystics, we also learn to be comfortable with uncertainty, and as you were just saying, looking into a very opaque mirror that's not like, oh, I don't see back out. Yeah, well, that's just how it goes. But yeah, so that's more of an observation, I guess, than
Yeah.
a question in there for you, Josh. I'm sorry.
No, it's good. I agree with you. Mysticism has been helpful in that. It's like I don't know, posture is the word that keeps coming to mind.
Mm,
Like kind of the posture that I take, approach that I take. But to your point about like the whole deconstruction thing,
yep.
and spiritual growth and stuff, um, as a process person, I reject the idea that fundamental reality is made up of static things, substances, and instead see reality as event based. It's the most truest aspect of reality is that it's becoming, not that it's being. And so for me, faith to be static, one, it can't exist, but it's dead. If it's not becoming, if it's not moving forward, it's dead. So
Wow.
I just have to reject the category of a static faith.
Amen,
Because
brother.
it doesn't fit in my metaphysical scheme. Talk about, see, now we're going to the nerd stuff, out of the heart into the head.
But
You know,
isn't
this,
it? Go ahead.
well, I was just going to say, this reminds me of, I get teachings from everywhere, and not always from places that I expect. Yesterday, I was driving down the road and I was listening to the U2 radio station on Sirius XM. I'm an old U2 fan, youth group in the 90s. And they were interviewing a physicist, Milton Gleiser, who is a co-author of a book called Blind Spot, which is the subtitle is something like How Science Cannot Ignore the Human Experience. So it's these scientists getting together and saying, "Oh my gosh, are you kidding me? Look, he's freaking holding the book.
Holding the book up." And there you
You're
are.
killing me. You're killing me." But and he was talking about all kinds of wild stuff as I'm driving along. He's talking about how we don't even really know how to define life, how one-celled organisms are somehow it's matter that can detect stimuli around it and respond to it. Like an amoeba knows there's some sugar over there, so I need to move over to
Yes.
But he brought up the ancient quote from Heraclitus, back 800 years before Christ, was the whole that statement of no man ever steps in the same river twice, because the river's moving,
right,
and the human has changed.
That is correct.
And that was kind of a long way around to get to this whole idea of the dynamic,
that faith is static, and that there's no done is
everything. It's always moving, and so
moving.
and then you think about bringing quantum theory about how that the same electron can be two different places at the same time, and you don't know where it is,
right?
So yes, that was a great product placement, though. I'm gonna call them up right now, but you guys
we'll have to tell the authors of The Blind Spot that they owe you money.
That's right. You just got to plug.
Yeah.
Yes, and visit our website.
So, Josh, why do you have the book?
I mean, because it intrigued me. I mean, the title, The Blind Spot, Why Science Can, cannot ignore human experience. So experience is big for me as a mystic. But also I saw a friend of mine, Dr. Andrew Davis, post it. And normally when Andrew posts books, they're worth reading.
Well, there you are.
And it is. It's really good. So their concept of the blind spot is analogous to what Alfred North Whitehead calls the fallacy of misplaced concreteness. And so they're doing processy type work in the book, which is pretty cool.
So,
and I do need to correct myself. It's Marcelo Gleiser. I think I got it mixed.
Yeah, you said Milton.
I got
Marcelo Gleiser.
Yeah, the brain too.
Yeah. So, Josh, I love the fact that we're nerding out here for a minute. And you brought up something, and I think hopefully it would be of interest to our listeners as well. So, although being nerdy can be a little not everybody's cup of tea.
His phrasing, the fallacy of misplaced concreteness.
I love that. So break that down now for simpletons like me.
Yeah, so basically Whitehead is saying that in philosophy and in science, we fell into this, we've made a grave mistake where we have taken abstractions, our ideas about reality, and then treated them as if they are something more than just an abstraction. So we've taken our ideas and made them concrete, which is a failure to recognize that, no, they're abstract. And so it's done a lot of really good stuff for us. Like science is amazing, right? Like we're using quantum physics right now to have this conversation. I don't know how it works, but the microphone's doing a thing and the screen and all this kind of stuff. It's excellent. It's wonderful. However, there are blind spots that science can't see because it's based on abstractions. And so I mean, it's deeper than that. It gets into the idea of like, can we trust our experience or not? It gets into how we understand consciousness. It's like this whole big thing. It's really basically it's metaphysics, our understanding of how our conception of how the world works. And so Whitehead was saying like we need to be careful that we're not taking our abstract ideas and treating them as if they are real, basically. That was long-winded, sorry.
No,
That's great
that was
stuff.
great. Because I flip it to this way then. When we look at, the things that the three of us do, right? We explore our faith, and that's what we share through our respective podcast, how we live our lives, so the things we do. So when we look at what would be a more typical spiritual experience is going to be within an institution, is that not exactly what has happened? Is that these are abstract concepts that then become concrete, that become the institutions?
Sounds about right to me.
Sure.
Yeah, I think sometimes they literally become concrete.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they really do. Yeah, and yet, isn't faith abstract by its very nature, right? Because is it, when you think about the oneness of it all, and that's the word I use, right? It's something I can't comprehend. It's incomprehensible to me anyway. So therefore, it will always be abstract. But if I'm okay with that and I don't try to make it concrete, then I'm going to live at peace with it.
Mhm.
Mm.
I think
Yeah, that's
Mm.
the who was it? There's a mystic, and he would do this prayer where he say, "God, rid me of God." And what he's praying is basically he's saying like, "Don't allow me to worship my abstract ideas of you because they're just that, they're my ideas." Um,
Oh,
and so yeah, the God rid me of God. Now I'm gonna have to look up. I want to make sure I can credit this individual. But that's a prayer that I pray often. Um,
oh.
yeah, it's that
yeah, it's
idea.
Meister Eckhart. I should have known.
Of course,
that
it's
makes sense. That
of
makes
course that
sense.
would be something you would say,
Yeah,
right?
don't make even your image of God an idol. That idea that if you think that you've got God figured out, you're whatever it is you figured out is not God.
It's not God. Which, okay, now I know so little about Islam, but you know how they don't have any images of Muhammad, right? Or not of Muhammad, but of God, right?
Mhm.
That's absolute heresy.
Mhm.
Of any imaging. Is it in that same space that whatever it is it is beyond our comprehension, but it's so holy and so sacred that like you cannot make an image of it.
I Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I think it's a natural extension of the the commandments against idolatry.
Right, right.
Is that it becomes anytime we reduce God to something less than a mystery, that we've then created an idol.
Right.
And honestly, it prevents, I think it prevents further growth and prevents further development, because once you've got God all figured out, then you don't need to figure anything else out. You're not open to further revelation.
Well, unfortunately, look how many of our soul siblings do think they have it all figured out, or they're told that they've got it all figured out if they live their lives a certain way and
Mhm.
have that certaintude, right? You're like this, oh, if you do this, then you're going to be good.
Right. I prayed the prayer.
I prayed the prayer.
Got this.
Yep. I go to church.
Yeah, I was just trying to find it and I can't, so forgive me. But Whitehead has this really great bit about like basically dogmatism being an exhibition in folly. Um and like which is another reason I love his framework, his process framework, is that it's just that of it's a framework and it's meant to be malleable and flexible and can learn and grow with our experience. Um and so it's more of an invitation to try something on and see how it works for you rather
Mm.
than this is the dogmatic, rigorous thing. So it's a bit more flexible.
That's well said. It was so. For context, you studied open and relational theology, yes?
So I did a lot by myself. I'm currently working on a master's thesis where I'm using process relational theology and ecclesiology, but I plan on doing a PhD in it when I'm done my master's.
There you are.
Yeah.
Cool. Can you, by the way, not everybody who's listening is going to know what process theology is or open and relational theology. Is there a short way of summarizing or at least giving like a top line view, the approach?
Yeah, absolutely. So open and relational theology is a phrase that was coined by an individual that both of you met at God After Deconstruction, Dr. Thomas J. Ord. And it's kind of an umbrella term to capture a pretty big group of people. But I can break it down by just doing the two words, open and relational. So open is making a claim about time, and it's saying that the future is genuinely open. It does not yet exist. So that's the open part. So there's going to be implications for theology in that, right? And
so
then
it's not like that predetermined, God has already set everything out and, has predestined some people for this and predestined some people for that, etc.
Yeah, so it's going to be pretty much the opposite of that. The future is genuinely open. God experiences time with us, and we are writing history together with the divine. The future is genuinely open.
Yep.
And then the relational aspect is more so making a claim about God, namely that we can have genuine relationship with God. And in a way that is both internal and external. So what I mean by that is if I have a relationship with you two, you both are my friends. When I'm happy, hopefully maybe that makes you happy. And when I'm sad, maybe you feel sad with me. In the same way that if, something tragic were to happen, I would, be sad because you guys are my friends. It's going to impact me, right? So the same too with God. We have the ability to impact the divine in the same way that the divine has the ability to impact us. So that's a claim about the relational nature of the divine. So that's kind of the umbrella. The future is open. God is relational.
What I was going to ask about is, among a lot of the reasons why people have issues with Christianity and some other religions are when tragic things happen. The idea, that can be traumatic, that can be, people are like, how on earth does God allow that to happen? And there's a lot of people who are just like, I'm done. There can't be a God.
Yep.
They
check out on that.
Can't be a God. And, and I think for me, one of the first entrance places into that, and I'll have to go back and look it up, that there was a poem that I read where it was somebody talking about, it was the death of a child or something really tragic. And somebody said, God mourns with you. I was just like, whoa,
God mourns with you.
What is that?
Yeah.
And I just wanted to put that idea out there and see if you can elaborate a little bit on how open and relational theology deals with things like tragedy.
Yeah, sure. So this is where it's going to veer off into a little bit more of Josh's interpretation of open and relational theology, because it's a broad category. And specifically, I'm of the process flavor. So it's going to be kind of a processy answer. But for me, basically tragic events, bad things happening was kind of the catalyst of why I found open and relational theology. And the move that open relational theology makes that I find compelling is that, as opposed to determinism, where God predestined and preordained everything that happened, right? So even the Holocaust, God planned it. It was God's idea, and somehow it brings God glory. That's one perspective. Then there's people who would say that it's free will. And so, even though God didn't plan it, God allows it to happen because people have free will and God wants us to, not be robots. Say,
Mhm.
okay, but to me, if God could prevent genuine evil from happening and chooses not to, in my opinion, that's an indictment of God. God is culpable for the evil that God could have prevented but didn't. So what the move that I want to make is say, and in open relational theology, is that God cannot unilaterally prevent genuine evil. It is outside of the realm of things God can do. And there's a reason for that, and it has to do with the essence of who God is. I believe that God is love. Big L, capital L, love.
Mhm.
Love is inherently non-coercive. And because love is non-coercive, it cannot force. In my perspective, God doesn't take over our body and make us do something. So because of that, God can't prevent genuine evil unilaterally by God's self because of the nature of who God is. God is love. So it's not that God is weak. It's just that God is love and non-coercive. So instead, God experiences my pain and my suffering with me. God knows what it's like to be Josh Patterson, to have the Josh Patterson experience and experience my pain and suffering and tragedy. God is in it with me, and it grieves God. And God takes that suffering into the divine self in each moment of becoming. It doesn't overcome the divine. Rather, God evaluates it, and then in the next moment of becoming, offers the next best possible thing that is good and beautiful and true. And so God is always trying to redeem suffering, never the cause of it, but always trying to redeem it. Always. So hopefully, does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It sounds so much like being a parent, honestly.
Yes.
And not, because I, grew up thinking about God as like the father,
Yeah.
but the really stern, abusive father, and I'm glad my earthly one isn't like that. So but it sounds much more like the true experience of being a father. And that was one of the things that started my, I don't know, I don't think you would call it deconstruction back when I started, but it was actually as a child thinking like, there's nothing that I can do that would make my parents abandon me. Nothing. There's certainly nothing that, like I could see them disciplining me, but I certainly couldn't see them disciplining me forever with no reprieve for without any redemptive part to it.
Right.
And how could I be so arrogant to say these two imperfect humans love me more than God does?
Mm.
And then I started thinking about like, well, then what is the deal with God then? Like, if God does love, then there's something in all this teaching that we got wrong somewhere along the way.
Hmm.
And that started a whole process where it was less deconstruction, because I feel like deconstruction has some activity to it, more like the Bible fell apart in my hands. And I had to kind of pick all the pieces back up over the years. But anyway, that just that whole idea, it strikes the parent in me, because now I know what it is to look at this person and be like, I'm just going to keep trying to make your life better, even if you step all over my toes.
Hmm.
Well said. Josh, thank you for that explanation, because that's really great. I do have a question into that. And this is from me, this is Mark's perspective of faith and oneness, right? So in open and relational theology, can I also see the oneness, like that we are God, God is us, and the oneness that comes through that? So can I live in that space with that?
I do.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
Yeah. So, that's the, short, answer, but
Right.
yes, I think so. So open and relational, well, so now we're getting processes. So process, um, is right. So Whitehead never called it that. Whitehead called it his philosophy of organism, um, because it recognizes the interrelated aspect of all things. So for Whitehead, the idea that there is an isolated individual it doesn't make sense. There's no such thing. Nothing in the universe is isolated. Everything exists in relationship to everything else.
There you are.
So the whole doesn't know itself without Josh. In the same way, I don't know myself apart from the whole. So everything is deeply interrelated. Also, most process people are panentheists, or pantheists. Some of them are just straight pantheists. But for me, I currently ride in the panentheism camp, that everything exists within God and God exists within everything. And then
Like me.
also, yeah, right. And then I'm also a pan experientialist, which has to do with like philosophy of mind. And the idea is that experience is ubiquitous. It goes all the way down. And this ties back in, Kelly, what you were saying about the interview with the blind spot. The smallest particles, subatomic particles, even they have experience. I'm not saying they're conscious like you and I are, but their experience isn't zero.
Right.
And so then, like, as things become more complex, then something like consciousness can emerge out of that.
Yes.
And so again, that's a deep inherent interrelatedness, interconnectedness. So that's the long answer to the just short yes.
And beautifully said. So for our listeners, let's go over those 3 words, because those are not really popular, or well, common phrases. So there's panentheism, okay, which you would define as?
I would say God is in the universe and the universe is in God.
Okay. Then there's pantheism,
which just kind of makes God is everything. There's less of a distinction. It's similar, but there's less distinction between God and everything else.
There you are. And then the third one you just mentioned, which is a new one to me, and you're going to have to repeat it. I apologize.
Yeah, so pan experientialism.
Wow.
Sometimes called panpsychism, but that word in philosophy world was kind of kicked out because people basically strawmanned it and said it was meaning something that it doesn't. But and so I prefer pan-experientialism, but that's kind of having its heyday right now in philosophy of mind conversations, consciousness studies, because our current worldview and perspective can't explain consciousness. Even the best neuroscience can't do it.
They can't, right? They can't.
And so pan-experientialism is an attempt to do just that, and it works quite well.
I love all 3 of those, and again, it's so great to have you on, because having these kind of nerdy conversations also shows, hopefully, to our listeners that there is this is what exploring faith is all about, right? It's outside of the box. Is that for the 3 of us to be engaged in this conversation, nowhere are we without our faith, right? If anything else, we've deepened this because we do this exploration. Unfortunately, though, I get it that some can't go where we are just fundamentally because of fear, if anything else. And I have family members that are like that, and I'm sure you too as well, and our listeners, that they must have the box, and the box that says it's okay to be inside this box. You step outside of this box, especially when you start talking about panentheism or pantheism, or
you're worshiping Pan.
Yes. Pan the pipe player. What?
You guys love Peter Pan that much?
Personally, I'm a Jeff guy.
Nice.
I love these conversations. This is why we do what we do. It's okay to have these questions, like, because you're getting to the mystery, to the unknown, and that this is enlivening, and it steps way outside the boundaries of what unfortunately a lot of our religious traditions currently have the capacity to operate in. So,
which actually does bring up a question for me. And Josh, in your ministry background, or just like what you picked up along the way, how do you counsel somebody who is really uncomfortable with uncertain. Somebody who's just like, I can't stand it when religion is not neatly tied up or formulaic, or, if I doubt one verse of the Bible, then I doubt the entire Bible. Or, if there's some tenet of faith that is that's now mushy, I don't know what to do with that.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. And that's part of, actually, that question is part of why I stepped away from vocational ministry, because I felt like I could unnecessarily cause people to ask the kind of questions that I was asking, and I didn't want to cause harm to anybody else's faith. That was never my intent. I've never wanted to take away anybody's faith. I've never wanted to undermine or deteriorate. That happened to me, and I would like that to not happen to people. So I've just tried to share what has been helpful to me. But in those situations, I really just, I have friends like that. I was talking to a buddy yesterday who's in that kind of place, and I just try to get really curious and ask a lot of questions and learn the why behind some of the things, right? So, for example, for me, I could just, throw out hell, right? I don't believe in hell's a thing. But somebody could really hold on to that closely, and it turns out that, like, oh, there was a really tragic thing that somebody did to them in their life, and hell is the only way that they think that they're going to have justice in their life. So for me to tell them that hell's not real is taking away this. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, this is an important thing for them. So being curious and asking. Now, I think hell is abhorrent, but that's not the point in a pastoral situation. You're trying to help somebody. So it's less about me telling them what I think and more about just being curious, being a listening ear, showing unconditional love and acceptance. And I think that you don't argue people into new ways of seeing things.
That's
But
so true.
you can love people into new ways of seeing things.
Yeah, but you can't argue them. You can't.
Yeah, you can build relationships with people and build trust with people, and then they're open to different things. So,
Oh my God,
Josh,
thank you.
You can't argue people. I'm gonna be chewing on that one all day.
Yeah. Well, you can manipulate them.
Yeah,
through
you could try, but most of the, I mean, just empirically, data and studies show us that when you argue, so like say on Facebook, right? My crazy uncle posts something stupid that I think is crazy about his favorite political candidate. And I'm like, oh, Uncle Johnny, you're so dumb. How can you believe that X candidate is so great? Blah, blah, blah. What that does, it doesn't change his mind. It actually cements him further into his position.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so it's not a great way.
Not a great way. At all.
People need to know that they're loved and accepted, not that, they're idiots.
So there's a powerful lesson out of this, my friend, that I hope in the work that I do, that I follow in your path. And it's because I am not, professionally trained seminarian or what theology, or pastoral care, I think is most appropriate here, is to apply the Hippocratic Oath here, do no harm. And I am going to be really mindful of that. I mean, I try to lead with love to the best of my ability in the conversations, and I definitely have evolved. But you're right. Just me saying something could very well be damaging, because who am I to use my position, like you said, to discount what they have? That's not how this should go. And that is you. And because of what you do, Josh, we need more of that. Because if you think of where we are in our culture, in the conversations that we have, whether they're political or religious or any of the stuff like that, it's not based on just what you just said of just listening and honoring their belief. It is theirs just as much as my belief is mine. And it's holding that imbalance in honoring one another, that's where love can seep in.
Yeah, and I want to be careful too because I don't want people to think that just means that I accept everything. Like
Nope.
if there's something that's harmful, I'm going to call it out.
Yep. Yep.
Like I
Yep.
don't think I'm going to be way less patient with somebody who's just espousing like straight up racist beliefs to me. I'm going to be like, no, you're off basis, my friend. Or people, like I don't know, people who are being homophobic or whatever. Like
Okay, right.
if you're
Because
causing
you are
harm to other people, then like that's not cool to me. And like I'm
agreed.
willing to stand up for that. But um, it
Right.
is easier to, I don't know, outside of that. I just want to make it clear that I'm not advocating for just being a doormat either.
Agreed. And thank you for saying that, because
Yeah.
I think I want to circle back to something, because I do know a part of your story and your journey is the fact that one of your brothers is queer, and
Yeah.
and so there is you have motivation inside of that to be loving to your brother, and that's helped you in this journey as well. So if you want to add more to that story, because you did share a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. I mean, so I have two brothers, and a sister, and both of my brothers identify as queer. One of them is gay, and the other one prefers, if they're made to choose a label,
Yeah. Okay.
pansexual. Um, and so that's just a big part of my reality and
Yeah.
experience. Um, and so that for me was never an abstract idea like that. If we're talking theological like arguments or something,
Mhm.
someone being queer was never just an idea for me. It was always an experiential reality. And so
Mhm.
um that experiential reality always kind of pushed back against any kind of theological things I was taught, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Exactly. Our
And I
lived
think
experience.
relationships do a lot for people. Like um like, all right, for example, I always understood um homosexuality because my brothers. But something that was harder for me to grasp was um transgender folks. Not
Mhm.
in a way, not like in a hateful way, but I didn't know, I didn't understand. And I mean, ultimately I came to the conclusion like I don't need to understand somebody to love them. That's silly. But
Right.
I uh stepped into a relationship, and now I have lots of transgender friends, and that's helped a lot. Relationships do that. I think
Yes.
Mhm.
relationship and love has a way of of I don't know, um humanizing people and things. And so, for me, one of my rule of thumbs now is I often like to tell people like um their friends or whoever that are throwing out transphobic rhetoric on the internet, like, hey, do you know any trans people? Have you ever talked to them? No? Well, then you should probably shut the fuck up because you don't know what you're talking about. Like, go have a relationship, and then you can whatever. But so yeah, I don't know. I think that's again just curiosity and openness. I think curiosity should be a spiritual discipline.
I agree. I love that.
Yeah,
Thank you for
spiritual
saying that.
gifts. But
Curiosity. Yep.
anyway, yeah. So that's always, I don't know. That's my brothers and my friends.
Mm.
So
Well, Josh, unfortunately, we have to bring this awesome conversation to an end. Um, I am so grateful that you dropped in and we shared some time. I really would love for you to come back. You just the love I have for you immediately was that weekend, just how you live your life so you just out there so fiercely that it's really it's energizing.
Yep.
So
Yeah. Really had a good time talking with you today, and with and relational theology, there's so much to it. We really just skimmed the surface
oh,
today.
totally. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
way a
I
lot.
mean, it's just, I think, a good intro
Yeah.
for for our listeners, and we've dropped the names of a bunch of books and scholars for them to follow up with. But I do hope that we can dig in a little deeper next time.
Yeah, most definitely. I would love that. And I'd love to have you guys on sometime too. Come hang out on Rethinking Faith. It's always a good
Okay,
time.
fine. Let's make it happen.
Deal.
I'll text you guys.
Please do. Listeners, our beloved listeners, we'll put this information, we'll put it in the show notes. So those books we were referencing, and Trip Fuller and the Homebrew Christianity and
the Radical Hobbit.
Yeah, the Radical Hobbit. That's our code. That's our code. And all that other good jazz. All right. So Josh, until we talk again, peace to you, brother.
Yeah,
Cheers.
peace to you guys. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Radical Love Live, co-hosted by Mark Dilcom and Kelly Wilson. All rights reserved. You can find our podcast on Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, and other popular podcast platforms. Go to radicallovelive.com to learn more about us, watch recordings of our live events, and listen to our podcast. We also invite you to check out what Kelly and Mark are doing by going to our websites. Find Kelly at kellywilson.com and Mark at markdilcom.com. This is Radical Love Live, where we explore faith outside the boxes.